Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 25th of July, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We will be joined by live video Skype link in just a few moments by Dr. Graham Downing, who's going to be talking about world population. Just a brief comment on the weather. Of course, summer was Saturday, in Plymouth at least, but it's now turned a little bit chilly grey, but dry across most of the country. Will we get summer again? Not too sure. Well, Mike, population.
Yes, so welcome to Dr. Graham Downing. Welcome to the programme, Graham.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Brian.
Right, so we're going to begin with declining birth rates, Graham, and you sent us these articles, one from Reading's population would start shrinking without immigration. We've got birth rate across Runcorn and Widnes falls according to latest figures. We've got Japan. It's not just in the UK. Japan's population falls for the 7th consecutive year. And also in the United States, what the baby bust means for America. And this article saying with a spiralling birth rate, America may be following in the footsteps of other high-income countries. There are more households with dogs than households with their own children. And this low birth rate will be felt across multiple sectors in the future. What's happening here?
I think, when you talk about population control, it's one of those things that's normally pushed to the outer atmosphere of conspiracy theory, and it's sort of mentioned in hushed tones, or it's mentioned about secret documents, and that always kind of shocked me, because being interested in this area, you find that actually this stuff is going on in front of our face, and it's going on all around the world, and it isn't some big secret. And there's many organisations trying to reduce the population. So what I thought I'd do is just send you just local papers, just to show you there's no secret documents here. And also what this shows is it's a complete opposite to what you think, because what you're told is that there's too many people in the world, the population's exploding, and it's all terrible and doom and gloom. And then the reality is that actually, in Europe and some other countries, actually they're predicting that the populations are going to shrink quite dramatically.
So we have a graph here which is showing how world populations forecast for world population for 2100 by continent, and that's a pretty stark graph. The first world, as it's traditionally known, seems like it's going to suffer most from this.
It's really interesting, because if you look, but there's a map on the left, and it looks at teen pregnancy, which is really, really important, and then the one on the right, which is predicted levels of populations. You're absolutely right. If you look at both charts, or both the map and the graph, it looks as though Europe is initially singled out for being the one where the problem is. Now, whether, I always say, by design or by default, Europe, all those continents, Europe is the one that's predicted to shrink in its population. And if you look to the one on the left, it's pretty much Europe, North America and Germany, those kind of countries, and of course Japan, where teenage pregnancies are absolutely falling through the floor by comparison to other countries. Other countries are kind of maintaining the amount of teenage pregnancies, or a little bit up, a little bit down, maybe a few exceptions. But across the board, with us in Europe, we're through the floor. I mean, we're really low. And this is actually extremely important, and I'm not sure of all the slides you're going to put up, but this is the first time since 1947 where our older women in the 40s, their fertility rate is now exceeding that of teenagers, and that is a absolute seismic shift. The next one shows you as well that Europe pretty much is heading, certainly the indigenous in populations of Europe. We're not talking about migrants or immigrants, we're talking about the indigenous populations are certainly looking as though they're trending towards extinction, because we aren't replacing ourselves at the sufficient numbers to keep ourselves going. I mean, that's it. And the kind of figure they quote for developed nations like ourselves, and bearing in mind there's a huge amount of assumptions with this, it's a very complex subject, is you need to be having 2.1 children, right, or above, to kind of maintain your stock, as it were, and we're falling below that. and the difference is people come into the country from other countries, certainly sort of Asia and places like that, then their fertility rate is higher. So we're becoming extinct, and certainly you saw that in those predictions there for Europe as the population numbers fell.
Now, of course, this has to have an impact on the older population as well, because obviously fewer younger people means less money in the health service to look after older people. That's got to be putting pressure on the sort of pro-euthanasia campaigns.
Well, as you go through these slides, you're going to see the detection that I've picked up on. I just put that one in there. It's just like an add-on from the last time we spoke, really, because yet another thing that paracetamol is now being found to cause something not very nice with, and this in this terms is fertility. Might impair fertility in men, and once again, this is probably one of the most widely prescribed or widely bought medicines in this country, and it's given to kids, obviously, and obviously adults, and you know, a significant percentage of the population have this stuff. So that was just really just a little add-on there for you to just know. But across the board, I'm not really going to go into massive detail today about all the different things they're called endocrine disruptors, or the plastics, or the chemicals, all the things that reduce fertility. But I wanted to show this trend. Now, also, if you look at that, that's once again that's just UK government stats. It shows you Berkshire, with all the sort of death rates falling. But when you went to Slough, with the fertility rates falling, but when you went to Slough, it was okay. It was above the 2.1 that you need. And of course, Slough there's a significant Asian immigrant population there, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But they tend to have a higher fertility rate. And then of course you've got Barking and Dagenham, which isn't too far from my neck of the woods, where I practiced. And certainly Barking is a massive immigrant area, and you're seeing obviously many Poles there now, as well as traditional sort of Asian immigration. And so this is just really stating facts, not saying anything wrong with it. It's just the facts that the indigenous English population just isn't replacing itself at a sufficient level.
And then, but we have other in Israel, Palestine dynamic. This is a similar thing going on. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the countries that seem to have avoided this decline in fertility rate. There's a few. One is obviously Africa is a big case, and Asia in particular. But Israel seems to be doing okay. And someone's written an article there. Obviously, it's got the same kind of dynamic in terms of the politics, Palestine versus Israel, and all the rest of it. And someone did complain about that article, and I didn't put it in for any political reason of anything, but I'm just noting. Israel seems to be doing okay. They've got a baby boom at the moment, so they're quite happy.
Okay, and right, so let's look at the Hindu then. Awareness on population control needed. So while in some parts of the world we've got collapsing indigenous populations, as you say, in other parts of the world, population control is something which is being sold to people. There's a political agenda behind it.
I mean, this is what shocked me when you look at this. This has been going on. It's actually been going on at least since the 70s, but it's huge around the world. And you know, there's people speaking here, and this paper's already saying, look, we need to have population control, and if you're going to have a baby, wait 3 years, and then wait 3 years between each baby. And so this isn't some secret document hidden in some, on the dark side of the moon. This is actually out there, and it's in newspapers. And so if anyone actually thinks that this stuff is some kind of mad theory, exotic theory, they couldn't be further from the truth. And this is another one. I think this might have been Philippines, and their commission on population, in other words, to get the population, is called PopCon, which makes it sound really nice. And they're all cheering because they're slowing the growth. Although they're alarmed that, unfortunately, the mums seem to be dying a lot more out there, but they're slowing the growth. So yet again, it's another example just from a newspaper. You can find these things online. So
their birth rate is slowing, but equally their medical situation is collapsing as well, and maternal young mothers are dying in childbirth.
Yeah, which is not good, and obviously it's not good. And there's a whole thing about that country. They've got a new guy in charge who's very anti-religious, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on with that, which I'm sure at some point I think he's even into extrajudicial killing as well, which I think is it was awful. But he's a very interesting character, that guy that's running that country at the moment. This was a graph, and this was generated by a computer. This is me kind of mucking around with this chart, if you like, this graph, and I did a bit of cappuccino statistics on it, where I drew some stuff on it. This is a computer-generated graph, and it's at a certain fertility rate, and it was showing what would happen to the world's population. Well, England, or the indigenous population of the UK, really isn't far off of that rate. So I mucked around with it and did a prediction, and I reckon to be honest, you're probably looking around 2,200, maybe 2,300, when really there's nothing left of us. We've gone. And even if we're off on the figures, don't look at it quantitatively, look at it qualitatively. The trend, if we continue the way we are as indigenous peoples in Europe, we're gone. We're absolutely not going to be here.
Okay, well, secularism, fertility, Zika virus, this is all about pressure on whether or not to have children.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that people want to talk about. They want to talk about geoengineering, they want to talk about all the really exotic stuff, but really we don't need to, because the main drivers of this, there's many drivers. There's one after this, which is gender, and we'll talk about that in a second, but secularism is huge. Once you start to become less religious, quote unquote, the amount of children you have tends to go down. And this is the reason why when immigrants come into the country, certainly from Asia, they're far more of concrete in their religion. They're far more, they practice religion, and they have beliefs in gods more than we do. So therefore, that seems to relate to that. Obviously, you've got on top of this, you've got urbanisation. If you put people into cities, they tend to have less children. There's reasons for that, economic reasons, which is another pressure to have urban zones, and as you know from Agenda 21 and all the rest of that. Then, of course, you have the things which are in your face, like this kind of trumped up Zika problem, which really is a problem that isn't a problem, where this big psyop about, if you have sex with someone after a certain amount of time and they can be infected and they can pass it through the semen to you, and maybe they can pass it through other ways. So you've got all that going on. That's stopping people having kids, or at least making them think twice. And certainly in those countries which had really strong abortion laws and rules, these happened in those countries where it's shaking those things up, and yet again that's going to effectively will decrease population there, as we're going to see down the line, and also it affects us. And then obviously you've got this new one called human herpes virus 6A, which they're saying can be spread through kissing, and they find that predominantly in women that have problems with fertility. What they didn't say in there is you've probably got it from a vaccine which has been made from aborted fetal tissue. They didn't tell you that. But there's all this subtle psychological warfare and very in-your-face warfare that's going on, which is kind of demonising the normal natural birth. These programs of people on the dole having 16 children, and you see it all the time. Anything about natural birth or having kids is kind of, you're dissuaded from it.
Well, indeed, and there are two main sort of propaganda strands in the UK, at least. One is how expensive it is to have children.
Yeah,
that's one. The other one is, which is in the news this last week or so, has come out of Theresa May, and the fact that all the furore over the fact that she doesn't have children, and the debate that is going on around that about whether women can have a career and be mothers as well. And so the pressure is absolutely on people in this country not to have children.
No, I agree, and I think it's been done very well. And when you see the teenage fertility, you see the amount of births to teenagers drop cataclysmically in Europe and North America, and obviously Japan. It's been a problem for many years. Then you see the effects of this. This is absolutely, you see the concrete effects. Then you see, I don't know if you put the next one up, which is the gender selection.
Right. So this is really, you're getting into your field now, because this is about genetics, and so this is gender selection. A strong and effective presence in the regional hubs would also enhance the new entity's capacity to deploy gender programming staff to countries in the region where it lacks a presence or substantive program. This would not only strengthen work on gender in those countries and throughout the UN system, but it would also help to expand the gender capacity of the UN as staff continue to be deployed in a graduated fashion. And the headline on this is GEAR campaign calls for increased resources and regional national presence of UN women. Tell us about GEAR.
Well, this is a kind of overseeing, or it's an organisation set up to kind of gathering all the other organisations which are worldwide trying to promote gender equality. Which don't get me wrong, gender equality sounds fantastic, but really what happens is when you get gender equality, really what you're doing is destroying gender. And this group stands for Gender Equality Architecture Reform Campaign. There's a mouthful. And if you read it, it's almost like a military thing. It says that they want to deploy gender programming staff. And actually a comment was made on this from, I think it was from the Population Research Institute by Joan Robinson. And I'll just quickly read it to you. She said she went to this conference, and this is massive UN conference, countries involved, huge numbers of people. And she said on the opening day of this, lesbian activist Charlotte Bunch and her collaborators held a gear campaign rally, making absolutely clear that the chief goals of the new UN super agency, which is this agency, would be 1, the eradication of traditional genders, and 2, the universal use of reproductive health care, which is to say the family planning package of abortion, sex education, contraception and sterilisation. Now, as I said, I'm all for gender equality and I'm all for people being equal and all the rest of it, but it's when it's used as a tool. And when you read the literature, they use these things. You can see that where they talk about this, they use this as a tool to bring down numbers of births, and they'll give all sorts of reasons for it, and I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not for or against. I'm not here to say that. I'm just showing you the reality of what is going on and the results of that.
Graham, if I may just come in there, we did some interviews over the last couple of weeks with some very interesting gentlemen and a lady, and they'd spent a lot of time in South America. And what they were specifically talking about were groups of trainers that were appearing in mainly local farming community, peasant-type communities, or maybe a little bit up on that. But the trainers were coming in, and one of the things they were heavily targeting were the women. And so we got a mixed-sex audience looking at what's going on here, and they all said that what they were seeing was that the women were being targeted to create fractiousness between men and women, and traditional roles were being attacked in order that they could destabilize the society to bring in the new plans. And although there were some non-government organizations involved, when the team had researched and tracked back, they inevitably came to United Nations policy teams. So Colombia, South America, seeing this stuff coming in very, very strongly.
And there is no. This isn't something exotic and out there. This is this organisation here, this super agency. I mean, you're talking huge numbers of people and bureaucrats and millions and multiple hundreds of millions of dollars and God knows what been invested. There are armies of these people, and absolutely, they go into town, they go into villages, and on the surface, it looks great. It's about bringing equality, and we all think that's fantastic. But there is another agenda to this, and people should be aware of this. And I think if you've got, I'm not sure if you've got that next slide up.
So here we are. This is I am your mother and your father, and this is a claim that there are at least as good reasons to pursue research towards enabling solo reproduction and eventually to introduce solo reproduction as an option for fertility treatment as there are to do so for any other infertility-related purposes. So now we're looking at what? Some form of genetic engineering here?
Yeah, what you're going to see over the next few slides, I'm going to show you where the trend is going. It's going broadly from dissuading you, some would say demonizing natural, the coupling of the male and female and having a normal birth, toward this interventional zone we're going into, this place where scientists will become more and more involved in reproduction. And in this particular case, what they're saying is, look, and we're not far from this, is it really from you, we'll be able to produce enough material in terms of we can make the cells, such as the sperm and the egg, and you can be both mummy and daddy. And and this links in again with this gender merging, this kind of destroying of the need for male and female, and it's definitely there. I mean, you can see the trend as we're going toward this. And I'm not sure if you've got the next one up as well. I just wanted to go back because it mentioned Planned Parenthood, which I know you guys are interested in.
So this is the number of abortions provided by IPPF.
Yeah, I mean, if you read it, what it says is that at that meeting, that gear meeting, this massive UN thing, GN, hundreds of millions of dollars, countries there, all sorts of stuff going on. Executives from the International Planned Parenthood Federation were in closed-door meetings with Denmark as the conference progressed, and they were strategizing on how to promote this super agency. And these people suggest, look, Planned Parenthood organization is a leading member of this gear campaign, this gender equality thing, and perhaps because it sees that the new agency's abortion and reproductive health programs would pour hundreds of millions of dollars into their pockets. And it talks about some other stuff. And then if you look to the side, this is from International Planned Parenthood, which obviously people must know, comes out of the eugenics organizations way back. And of course, much promoted is Bill Gates' parents were in fact senior people within this organization. This is a report, and this is their 5-year performance report, which using those words with abortion just doesn't fit well with me. And if you look at it, they're now hitting, just from their clinics, they have clinics all around the world, they're terminating over 1 million children a year. Now, once again, this isn't a pro or an anti-abortion thing. I'm not discussing that. I'm just showing you the facts of what's going on. And the thing for me isn't that abortion is wrong and we should be against it. I'm not saying that, and there's obviously awful tragedies which happen that people would want to have that done, and don't get me wrong, that's awful, but it's this commercialization of it, this looking at it as a business and projections and reports and 5-year. This is what I don't like, and I think you have up on the screen the next slide there, and that is literally very, very tiny, literally in this week. This was from the Republican platform.
Right, so they're saying we oppose the use of public funds to perform or promote abortion or to fund organizations like Planned Parenthood, as long as they provide or refer for elective abortions or sell fetal body parts rather than provide health care. We urge all states and Congress to make it a crime to acquire, transfer or to sell fetal tissue from elective abortions for research, and we call on Congress to enact a ban on any sale of fetal body parts. And they say, in the meantime, we call on Congress to ban the practice of misleading women on so-called fetal harvesting consent forms, a fact revealed by a 2015 investigation. We will not fund or subsidise healthcare that includes abortion coverage.
Yeah, now, as I said before, I'm not having an opinion here on whether you should have abortion or not. It's not about that. But what was interesting is, at this level, this is the Republican Party. Now, for them to have to be fighting against the selling of fetal body parts, then that means then they must know that fetal body parts are for sale. And there's a big market in this, and they call it fetal harvesting. The actual subject of how this is done is absolutely awful. I mean, it's demonic, quite frankly. And I won't get into it now, but maybe at some point we can discuss this. It will certainly put people off their lunch if you talk about how this is commercialized and how these parts are acquired. But I found that so astonishing. And for Brian as well, when he was mentioning about some of the vaccination stuff, how dark some of this stuff can get, you really are entering the realms of darkness here. And this is a national party. I mean, at their level, they're recognizing it and they're speaking out against it and say they want laws against it, which shows you how big this industry must be. And as I said, I don't like it when you start commercializing the sale of body parts of babies. It is disgraceful.
And then the next thing that we seem to be making a commercial program is DNA testing to work out how well your children might do at school. This is the Daily Mail. Such tests are likely to meet resistance from privacy groups and teachers who will fear it could also be used to segregate children on the basis of their genetic makeup. This is eugenics, isn't it?
Yes, and this is the trend of where it's going. It's now we're talking about literally on the verge of being able to select children and say, look, well, at least where we think they might be more intelligent. And there's other ones I did send you. I'm not sure if you had a chance to put them up, which showed you that the IVF market was now booming. And there's another one by a doctor who was in the States who was offering first-rate gender selection. This is all going on now. And when you see this trend away from demonizing the natural birth, and there's too many of us and we're all procreating too much, and then pushing towards this other thing, you kind of get a dichotomy here, because, well, if there's a problem with fertility and we've got too many, then why they've got this booming industry and they're promoting it in such a positive way. And the reason it must be is because they must know, or they must be pushing for this to move from natural into the unnatural, into the technical and scientific way of having children.
So here's the next one. The next great advance in fertility treatments may rest with 5 young monkeys in a lab outside of town. Each of the 5 carries genes from 3 parents instead of 2 because they were conceived using a novel and controversial gene therapy. Researchers are watching them closely to make sure they age normally, can reproduce, and have healthy children. If so, the 3-parent fertilization technique will likely be tried in humans. Where does this end?
Well, it's not. It's just beginning. And exactly, so now you can have, well, you can be mummy and daddy if you want. If that's not enough, maybe you can get someone else to be a parent with you. And what you've got to do, you must see this for what it is. You must see the writing and where this is going. This is transitionary. It's all done under the guise of it's all fertility and help people. I champion that. I think it's fantastic. And if there are people with gender issues and all the rest, we have to try and help them. And no one's suggesting that shouldn't happen. And if someone is having problems having children, I do that work. We have to help them. But where this is, what you've got to see is this is a trend, okay? And they are pushing the boundaries. And that experiment there is being done now. That was July the 8th. That article. You know, this isn't pie in the sky, as I say. I'm going to bore you with this, but it's not some secret document from a whistleblower somewhere, you know, in a mine 100 miles underground, some secret place. This is happening right now.
Right.
And really be aware of this.
And so it just doesn't end, because here we've got Pandora's Matrix, the world's first artificial womb. So here's 2 or 3 articles on that. And another one from the Huffington Post here. What happens when we don't need women's bodies for gestation? And is this then the ultimate goal here?
Yeah, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I would agree with you, Brian. You're absolutely right. This is the ultimate goal. And what this transitionary science is doing, it's kind of warming us up to where this is going, which is, you know, is to she's talking about ectogenesis there, and she's mentioning a few experiments. One of them they did on just mice, and they took a mouse embryo, took it outside the womb, and then allowed it to grow to nearly full term. And they also did it on people. They did it on a goat, and I'm going to show you that. I did give you a picture of that. Hopefully, we can show that at the end. And also, they people will be shocked by this, but they've actually done it with a human embryo up to about 10 or 12 days. But they had to terminate it after that because they didn't have permission to go any further. And they call it ectogenesis, or extracorporeal gestation. And what you've done is you've then gone to the last slide, which is 3 very interesting characters. The man that termed back over 100 years ago the term ectogenesis was Professor Haldane. He's a revered scientist, Oxford, very, very bright chap. He was the one who brought in the population science, if you like. And so his imaginations have now come true. We are now very, very close to this. And interestingly, to the left of him, to the right on your screen, at the left of the picture, is none other than Aldous Huxley, which I'm sure you'll all know who he is, and the book that he authored, The Brave New World. And next to him is another guy called Lewis Gilegud, who ended up being in charge of and these kind of global organisations bringing change across the world. And there's another person not in there I won't mention now. There's the sister of Haldane. And this stuff I'm showing you is forming a new talk that we're going to be doing, which I think we may be touring the country doing. I'll talk earlier about that, Ian Crane. But excuse me. These people are massively instrumental in the world. Excuse me, that we're living in now. Because out of their imaginations have come the kind of reality that we're living in. And I'm not sure if I can see that quote. Is that the quote I sent you?
That's the quote from about Haldane. He speaks with an underlying, sometimes foreboding tone, which warns that scientific advances, if they're to be truly of benefit to humankind, must be paralleled with advances in ethics and wider public understanding.
When I saw that, it lifted my heart a bit. And I thought, wow, even though he's been the kind of father of this madness that we're going into, he recognised that maybe, you know, we have to have the right ethics, the right morals, all the rest of it. But then when I looked at it again, it kind of reads to me as if to say, well, we have to move forward, but we have to let the ethics catch up with it. In other words, we have to change what we believe in order to catch up with this, so that we can. And that then started to worry me a little bit more. And then, if you look to the very, very last slide, which is, it's astonishing, because you've got his little group of mates nearly 100 years ago sitting around discussing all this. You've got Aldous Huxley with his mate, who's brought out that famous book, and this is a cover from performance of that, and you see the baby in the ectogenetic bubble, if you like.
Well, what is that? Is that a lamb? Is that a lamb, Graham?
Well, yeah, and on the left you see this goat experiment, which is the real deal. Okay, and scientists with their bits of tubes going in. You compare left to right. Now, what we didn't read is that this guy, this professor, he predicted that by 2074, now he didn't say 2075, he didn't say late 21st century, he didn't say 2080, he said 2074, only 30% of humans will be born naturally. The rest will be like you're seeing there. Now, that's uncanny in itself. And you also have to know that all those guys there, you're talking socialists, Fabian Society, birth control, all of these people were involved in those kinds of areas. And the thing that I want people to think about is this. Imagine that not being a baby goat growing. Imagine that being a baby human. Then when you've got that in your head, then imagine 1,000 of them next to each other. And then imagine 100,000 and 1,000,000. Because if you think it's pie in the sky and conspiracy theory, you're completely on the wrong plane. Because this is where we're headed. And I tell you something, you're going to see this within your lifetime.
Wow.
Well, Graham, I know there's a stunned silence. There's a stunned silence here, and I can feel it on the airwaves, if I'm allowed to say that. Of course, we've got this massive attack going on with families anyway. All of the work that we're doing around what social services are up to, the attempts to break up families, certainly break up happy families, taking children disappearing into the so-called care system. Well, we know abuse goes on, but it's a very dark area where there are more and more suggestions, let's just say that at the moment, that children are also disappearing for the use of body parts. And of course, we've had the baby scandal around Bristol Hospital and other hospitals. And when people started to open the lid on that, things got very, very nasty indeed. So it's not just one area that's being targeted. This is very, very calculated. It's a collaboration to actually force childbirth away from a mum and a dad. And obviously it takes a very dark mind to do that. My opinion, it's demonic. But this thing is breaking surface without a question.
I mean, I couldn't agree more in some of the things you were saying there, is that at some point it has to break the surface. You're absolutely right. And it has done now, because everything I've just shown you is from published research and from local newspapers. As I said, no secret documents here. And the thing you have to realize is that there is two sides to it. There is a very dark side to it. There is no doubt about that. And also what you've got, which is part of that, is this commercialization. This end user, because to get this technology off the ground, it involves huge investments, and people aren't going to do that unless they're going to get a payback. And what people are seeing down the line, although there is fantastic use for this technology, and don't get me wrong, there is they're seeing a payback. And there's no way, once you get, I listened to a lecture the other day by an academic lawyer, and they were talking about the way that human rights and your rights are removed. Once a commercial end product can be identified and profit can be made from a certain thing, then the rights of humans are removed to allow that to make its profit. And we see that across the board. And they do it through various panics. You see it through various, people say false flags. You see it through fake epidemics, the Zika thing and all the rest of it. And it's done to then drive legislation to get you to the point where you're going to accept the medication or accept this. And this, to go forward, has to generate huge profits, and therefore you will see the 100,000 tanks of this. And as I said, when I thought about it today, it absolutely turned my stomach. And what we don't want is our children coming into the world, or certainly children who've got now, getting used to this and thinking that this is normal. And certainly, I don't want to see masses of children born this way. I think it's disgraceful, and I think we really have crossed some kind of Rubicon when we do that. It is immoral in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you very much for your time today. You're welcome to stay and comment on other stories if you wish, but thanks for joining us today. And I'll just say you've hit the nail on the head regarding human rights, because as I keep banging on about, one of the key points about human rights is that these are rights given to us by another human being. Well, first of all, what gives that human being the right to give me or take away rights? And the other point is it's based on a blank piece of paper. So they write down what rights we have. They can rub out what rights that we don't want us to have anymore. They don't want us to have anymore. So extremely dangerous human rights. But
absolutely, and we have just hit a big shift, as I've just said. This isn't in the back room anymore. This is now fully out in the open, and people should be advised of this. And it's up to them to have an opinion on it. I certainly don't want the world to go this way. It sickens me, quite frankly. And hopefully enough right-minded people will get together. Maybe we can do something about this, and maybe we can move this in a much more positive direction.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Okay, let's move on. Brian?
Okay, well, we'll move on by saying quite simply that, of course, it's not going to be the BBC that blows the spotlight on what we've just heard. Let's come in at the angle of Turkey, and we've got some interesting reporting. Turkey coup attempt, arrest warrants issued by journalists. We've captioned this one rule for Turkey and another for the UK. This is the heart of the matter. Turkey's authorities have issued detention warrants for 42 journalists, according to local media, as part of an inquiry into the failed coup on the 15th of July. And BBC, of course, straight in there. Turkey has been criticised for restricting press freedoms in the country, a charge that Ankara denies. Well, let's come to the Press Gazette. This is going back to December in 2015. The 67 UK journalists arrested and or charged in the course of their jobs since 2011. And as part of the text, encourage people to go to the Gazette and read the story. It says, over the last 5 years, the UK has arrested more journalists than anywhere else in the Western world. Globally, the countries that compete with us include the likes of Eritrea and Iran. And we'll just add in there that, of course, the UK column has been warning about the role of Common Purpose to help create the Leveson inquiry, which made such a blatant attempt for the British state to take complete control of the press. But here we are lecturing Turkey on what they should be doing in their own country. And I'm just going to say, certainly UK column is sick of the British government lecturing overseas countries while having exactly the same attitude that they're criticising in UK. We thought the best way to really show this issue with the UK journalists is a little video clip, because the list is simply too long. So here we are, UK journalists arrested and or charged in the course of their job since 2011. We just play it through in order to just get a visual idea of what it looks like. A little bit slow to start, but I'm not going to read the names out. The significant thing is that only a handful, less than a handful, were actually found guilty. As you can see, most of these individuals were found not guilty or were cleared. Overwhelmingly found not guilty or cleared. But this is after the police had broken down doors, frightened the journalists, scared their families, and this was part of the UK state witch hunt. And on it goes. You note the cleared names there: not guilty, cleared, 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 cleared. Some were guilty, but we've got sufficient existing laws to cope with crime where it occurs in the press and media. But let's remember that this was from the same UK that is busy lecturing Turkey at the moment on how they should treat journalists. And then we decided to just get a little bit deeper into the issue of Turkey. We were interested to see that the BBC reporter that produced the story, Nick Thorpe, is a member of the Anglo-Turkish Society. And here he is at the Society actually presenting a book on European society around the Danube, which I think he got some sort of award for. But if we go and have a look at the names of the Anglo-Turkish Society, we were just fascinated to see that it is actually Boris Johnson, now Foreign Secretary, who is the president. So no bias there then, Mike?
No.
Presumably. Mm. And we'll also bring up our old friend Media Action, because, of course, they were boasting that they were helping to destabilise countries, including Syria. And on their website here, it says very clearly they're involved in Turkey. When you do a search, however, on the website for what that means...
they don't want to tell us?
They don't want to tell us.
Good.
So I'll bring in this one, which is a talk at Chatham House. The lead journalist listed there, Mr. Baydar, is Turkish himself, but the second speaker, James Dean, is from Media Action itself, and this BBC charity lecturing the world on how to run free and democratic press. So this is quite sick-making, and we're going to ask for as much help as possible from our viewers and listeners to follow what the BBC is really up to in Turkey. And we'd love to have some more information on what Media Action is doing.
Moving on, just at the end of last week, Michael Fallon, the current Defence Secretary, was speaking in Washington. And as usual, I just want to highlight a few of the comments that he made. So here we are. And we do have the will and the intent to respond to threats whenever or wherever they come from. He said, thanks to the Strategic Defence and Security Review we published before the end of last year, we're going to match that with greater capacity, that will with greater capacity. So we're going to spend lots of money. He said last year our forces were active all around the world, some 80,000 soldiers deployed in more than 383 commitments during the year, more than 30,000 sailors deployed on over 700 ship visits. Well, where else would they go? Because they don't have any ships of their own to be on. So 700 ship visits from Africa to Asia, Europe to Latin America, more than 10,000 Royal Air Force personnel deployed in over 60 countries on operations, training exercises and defence engagement. And we have a similar level of effort this year. Now, that little quote, I want to just keep it on screen, Theo, please. I want to just point out General Sir Frank Kitson, Brian, because he, of course, commander of the SAS in the Mau Mau Rebellion in Northern Ireland, various places, and he wrote a book called Gangs and Counter-Gangs. And he explained in that book that the British were covertly leading large-scale Mau Mau units in Kenya, and that many, if not all, of the Mau Mau units had been created by colonial authorities, so in other words, by Britain. And as a result, 22 British military personnel were killed during that rebellion, and 20,000 Mau Mau Kenyans were killed during that rebellion. Okay, so and then this went on to the SAS in Southeast Asia. In New Zealand, for example, 30% of the SAS were drawn from Maori tribes. And in the 1960s, the New Zealand SAS was active right across Southeast Asia, including Burma and in northeastern India. So what he's saying here, I believe, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I believe what he's saying is that they are taking this policy, which Kitson wrote about in his book, and we're seeing it in action in the last 12 months. We're saying we have a military which is unable to be deployed in the conventional sense. So
as a unit itself.
So instead we send out small groups right around the world where we make sure that it's those local populations, those local militaries that are the people that are in the front lines getting killed, while we're running the training and the subversion and the gangs and the counter-gangs.
I think that's absolutely correct, Mike. And the other clue is that they described the the latest defence policy as being an internationalist defence policy. But of course, in those figures there, what Mr. Fallon said is disingenuous at best, because he's talking about 80,000 troop deployments over 383 commitments. Well, 80,000 men is close to the total of the British Army. So it's not the British Army that's making 383. What he's really talking about is small groups making hundreds of visits to very strange places. Specialists. Yeah. And then, of course, we've got the same with the ship visits. There's something really strange about that, because even if we multiply it up with the number of ships we have got, how do you reach 700 ship visits? I think we're talking about military personnel, naval personnel. That's what he's called.
One at a time, you mean?
Well, one at a time, probably. Yeah. So disingenuous at best, lying to the public, more closer to the truth, I think.
Okay, well, let's move on with it then, because he went on to say a powerful NATO is vital to our future. So to our key bilateral relationships. And he said, we are now focused on reshaping our relationship with Europe, restoring sovereignty to the British Parliament, but making sure our security and trading relationship remains strong. Now, keep that in mind, trading relationship, because we'll be coming on to that in a second. And he also said, while we forge new relations right across the globe. So they are, whether or not they finally implement Brexit, in the meantime, they're using Brexit as a political tool to drive forward the changing relationship between Britain and other nations. And he went on to say, we will be sending additional trainers to Al-Assad air base in western Iraq to instruct more Iraqi troops on how they counter improvised explosive devices. These extra trainers will be working closely with US and Danish forces. Sorry, I misread that there a second. I thought, anyway. And he finished off by saying, in conclusion, let me reassure you, Britain is not stepping back. On the contrary, we're stepping up. The UK is leaving the EU, but we've not forgotten that deterrence and defence are underpinned by cohesion and solidarity. So I believe what's happening here is that they are repositioning relationships, bilateral agreements. This is all about military integration, not just at the European scale, which is where we're at the moment, but broader than that even.
Much broader. And of course, the training gives you unique insight in any of the foreign militaries you touch. If you've helped train them, you know what tactics they're going to use, so very easy to control them.
Yes. Now, we mentioned trade a second ago, so let me introduce you to the first Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Philip Jones. He was speaking to the City of London at Mansion House last week. And again, we'll just mention a couple of things that he said. The City of London and the Navy are both defined by tradition and modernity in equal measure. Our shared strength reflects the UK's international standing, as determined by history and geography. But our success has the power to shape the UK's continuing place in the world. The Royal Navy shares that agenda. Britain will always be an island nation, totally dependent on the sea for our security and prosperity, and an understanding I know I share with this audience. We remain in a position of global leadership, which includes the Royal Navy's permanent command of NATO's maritime forces. Yet, as an island and a trading power, the UK's security and prosperity is indivisible from that of the wider world. Our historic relationship with the City of London is testament to this. 350 years ago, the city's wealthiest citizens raised £16,000, not an insignificant sum back then, to fund the construction of a new warship. The King, so taken with this display of patriotism, named her Loyal London. But those 17th century Londoners weren't motivated by loyalty or patriotism alone. They were merchants and traders. They knew that prosperity and security were intertwined with that a strong, credible Royal Navy was necessary to protect and advance their own commercial interests. Sorry, I know you're about to be ill at this point, Brian.
Well, it's just remarkable. The words go on and on. They spew out of the mouth of the first Sea Lord. We've got a navy with no fully working aircraft carriers, no maritime patrol aircraft, huge problems in our submarine fleet, submarines crashing into ships. We haven't got enough ships. We haven't got enough engineers. We haven't got enough non-commissioned engineers, the really key people that keep the ships at sea. We haven't got any of these things, and this man is standing up as if he was heading up the United States Navy. It's just incredible. This is clearly another man drenched in gold braid, drowning in bunker mentality. He hasn't realised that he doesn't have a navy because his colleagues have absolutely given it away.
Well, just to quote to read out the quote that's on the graphic there. Rest assured, the Royal Navy is here for whatever the future holds from our maritime trading nation and this great global city. And of course, he's referring to the City of London. I've read out some quotes there, Brian, but if I was to press the whole speech, the message that he was trying to send is whatever resources we have are at your disposal. And he was, of course, speaking to the City of London at the time.
Yeah, so it's a navy to, in general, help the criminal elite. As somebody's pointed out, of course, the Type 45 destroyers from the Royal Navy don't work in the Gulf because the water's a little bit hot. I think it's heated up over the last few years. So those ships don't work due to hot water, but clearly the First Sea Lord is very big on working on hot air. And I think probably we should end our news today at that point. I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us. We have covered some particularly dark material today. It needs to be covered. Don't research late into the night, and do get out and do the brighter things if you're starting to get interest in these subjects. Talk about it is the other key thing to do. And lastly, I'll say thank you very much to those who've made donations to the UK column. It's much appreciated, and certainly the comments to encourage us to do and keep doing what we're doing is a big boost. So thank you very much if you've made a donation over the last few days. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.